Sorry, you can hear me now, can't you? Yes? Okay, good. Okay, so what we're going to be talking tonight is the cult of icons in the context of late Roman art. And this builds especially on the talk about the martyrs, because the cult of icons grows right out of the cult of martyrs. And I'm Dr. Raverty, an art historian. I've been here before to talk about 19th century romantic landscape painting and in the context of kind of Protestant 19th century theology. But my area of expertise is not the ancient world or the medieval world, but is the 19th and early 20th century. And that's kind of the unique position I bring to my study of icons, I'm, I think, the only modernist that's really dealing with it. Now, of course, icons have enjoyed a real resurgence in the West, especially among Episcopalians, especially among Anglo-Catholics. And I noticed that your church has several of these in the new old style. But what many people don't realize, especially from the West, is that this resurgence of icon painting in the traditional styles, the old style, Byzantine style, Russian style, is really a resurgence. It's a revival. It's sort of like, in some respects, the Oxford movement in the 19th century that revived a lot of Catholic practices. And that's the angle I bring to it, because a lot of people don't realize that the tradition had sunk into a real nadir of really bad painting over the last 200 or 300 years. For example, here's a painting of the Transfiguration in oil paints from around 1900, maybe 1905, 1910. That's in the collection of the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral uptown. And they were very, very curious of why I'd want, of all their icons, to photograph this one, because it's in this kind of old style. Now, here's an icon by Photius Contiglo, the artist that I was talking about earlier and wrote a couple of articles on. He is a 20th century artist of the same generation as Picasso. And he was in Paris during the First World War and its aftermath. The painting, however, looks much older to us because it's in this traditional Byzantine style. And it's really Contiglo, more than anybody else, that really almost single-handedly revived this tradition that had slumped to such a sort of sentimental thing, reviving the traditional egg tempera on panel, reviving the kind of a more two-dimensional approach to space that reminds us a little bit of Cézanne and early Cubism. The use of gold, the use of this nimbus, all these things are very marvelously, he spent time in Mount Athos restoring ancient icons, and this is kind of how he learned this technique. So anyway, I just wanted to realize that. And even there's a monograph on him that was written in the 70s. He died in 65, but even that is by a Byzantinist. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And what I wanted to talk about today in relationship to St. Luke is the origins of icons, because as you're probably aware, there is a narrative that claims that St. Luke painted the very first icon, that besides the writer of the Gospel and the Book of Acts and being a physician, that he was also a fine painter, and that he painted a painting of the Virgin Mary from life. Now, because I'm not an expert in this, I've consulted the best experts, and one of them, and this is really the most important book over the last 25, 30 years, and it was published in the mid-90s. It's by the German art historian, and he's a medievalist, Hans Belting, and it's Likeness and Presence, A History of the Image Before the Era of Art. And it's a huge tome of over 600 pages, and there's lots of footnotes the way the Germans do, and it's just incredibly exhaustive. And I would really suggest that to anybody that can take it on. It's really a worthwhile, up-to-date thing. Another, talking about kind of the theology of the icons, I really think the most superb summary of it is in this wonderful book, The Meaning of Icons, that was originally published, and it's by Leonid Ouspensky. And he's a theorist, all about the same generation as Contiglo. And this is just really approachable, He does it really well. And he summarizes the traditional theology of icons, which ends up being kind of their art theory, so to speak, back then. So I could suggest to him. Of course, the original is St. John of Damascus, who wrote on concerning images long ago. But I think Ouspensky does the best version for 20th century. And then I wanted to also draw on this antique scholar. He's a scholar of Roman, especially late Roman art, Thomas Matthews, and that is spelled correctly. It only has one T. He teaches at NYU. He's phenomenal and prolific. And he did this catalog for the Getty Museum in 2016, 2017, something like that. Dawn of Christian Art in Panel Paintings and Icons. And so this talk is very indebted to these scholars. Now, icons, the tradition of icons is much older than we had at one time believed, not too long ago. And the first mention Belting says there is of actual icons is in this apocryphal book called the Acts of John. And I don't mean the apocrypha that's in a Protestant a Bible. I mean the New Testament apocrypha. And this is a very strange, rambling life, I guess, of John. And it's kind of a Gnostic piece. And it's, when you read these things, you really realize they really picked the best ones, those four Gospels in our book of Acts by Luke. But the interesting thing from our standpoint, beyond the theology, is it has the first mention of an image being used and being venerated. And this is a very early document. The document is actually pieced together, but this part that contains this story is from the oldest part of the document, scholars think. And this is the mid-2nd century, so around 150 AD. We have this Acts of John. And it's a story about a man and his wife is ill, and he asks Jesus to come, and Jesus wanders his way and ends up in India at the end. And he comes to this man's home, but he's too late. It's very much like the Lazarus story. It's too late, she's already dead, but he rises her from the dead. And then he does other miracles and so forth. Then he comes back to the house of the man whose wife was raised from the dead as a dinner guest, I guess, later on. And when he comes back, the host says, I want to show you something. And he takes him into a private chamber and he shows him this little painting of the saint, of St. John, right? That he said he had an artist paint for him. And there was some incense in front of it. And it was a little altar. Okay, and so this is the very first mention of that kind of a thing. Now, when you think about it as a story, for example, let's say that I invited Father Reynolds over to my house for dinner. And I said, Father, come back, I want to show you something. And I take it, and there's a little painting of him with a candle and incense and stuff. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Father Bull would probably say, take that down. I'm just a priest. You should have a picture of a saint or of Christ or something like that. And this is kind of almost the reaction you expect. But the surprising thing is, he doesn't react at all. He doesn't say it's good. He doesn't say it's bad. He just, and they move on. And it's that extreme casualness that Belting feels is revealing, because it's as if, a matter of course, that people have images, that they burn incense in front of it. He didn't seem either offended, or he didn't seem to want to condemn it, or to say that's great, everyone should have an icon of me. And so almost in its nonchalant, sort of just thrown off manner as a story, it reveals a lot about that there were already probably images in use, and it didn't seem to surprise John at all that this sort of thing was happening. Now, we don't have any icons that exist from that period, and that's why it's such a valuable little excerpt of a story, because it demonstrates to us that there were icons at that time, even though we don't have any that survived. But here's something that did survive, and this is from about 180, I think they say, and it's from the Getty, And it's a triptych, it's a small thing, and it's a pagan. He belongs to the cult of Isis and Serapis, or Isis and Osiris, the ancient Egyptian gods that were revived in a kind of cult among the Romans, especially those that lived in Alexandria and in Egypt. And this was buried with someone. And this is his own picture. This is a picture of the deceased. And on either side, he has on one side Isis, and the other side Serapis, Osiris, that are the protectors. And you fold it together, and you could carry it with you, but it would also be put with the deceased as a blessing into the afterlife, because they believed in the afterlife. And they buried their dead, because the Romans mostly cremated their dead. All right, now what I want to talk about, because my expertise is the 19th and 20th century, is an incredible paradigm shift that happens right around the turn of the century, right around 1900. So we're talking about the history of art history, right? If you can stay with me here. And what happens is there was a narrative about art history that was used all the way back to the 18th century, and it goes something like this, that explained late Roman art, that explained the time of the origin of the icons. This 19th century art historical narrative went something like this. Early Greek art, archaic art, was stiff. It was kind of primitive in some ways, still holds the shape of the block, and it has a crudeness to it that makes it archaic. But then comes classical art, and the Paolo Belvedere, which is in the Vatican now, they thought was from the 5th century BC. It ends up, it was a little later, but it's a beautiful example of classicism with its idealized form, with its balance, order, harmony, all that sort of stuff. This is a god Apollo, the god of the sun. It's larger than life size, and it is absolutely ideal. And it is not, the swimmer's body, not a hair on his body, perfect poise, beautiful. And they consider this really the epitome and the high point. But they see there becomes a degeneration as we get to the Romans, and we get this sort of brutal realism, that gone is the idealism, they say, of the ancient Greeks, and now we're left with this sort of rough, pragmatic, Roman, tough, almost brutally realistic picture, not at all idealized, and that they saw that as a coming down. And then they saw late Roman art where we have an abstraction of form. They said, well, this is just, they've completely lost it. They no longer know how to do it the right way, and it's reverted to a new sort of archaism. And this is a Roman emperor of the eastern provinces shortly before Constantine. So the beginning of the 300s, beginning of the 4th century, and it's beautifully preserved. Okay, no art historians any longer accept that reading of art history, but let me show you what they brought in as kind of part of their evidence. This is the Arch of Constantine on the Roman Forum, at the end of the Roman Forum, and over here you can see I hope you can see this arrow, but this is the Colosseum. And so what I wanted to, it's a strange kind of a collage of a sculpture. It's not really architecture. There's no rooms in it. It's poured concrete faced with marble. And it's sort of a collage because he brought in parts of older monuments called spolia that he sort of robbed from them. So here, these statues up here are from an earlier period. And I want to look at these two rondelles over here closely, because these are from Hadrian's time, from over 100 years before Constantine. But these down here are from Constantine's time. And they noticed there was this real difference in style, and they thought this looks crude and this looks, more classical, more refined. If we look very closely at it, we can see one of the things that Constantine did, it's kind of humorous almost, is he had his sculptors that were doing the monument, he said, take off Hadrian's head and put my head in there. So they did. They put a perfect little head, and it's right there now in the boar hunt. Or in the other one, here he is by a pagan statue, oddly enough, kind of for a first Christian emperor. But this is, I think, Pluto, the god of the underworld. He has the three-headed dog here. And again, the head of Hadrian was taken out and removed and replaced with a head of Constantine. Now, if we look below, and I kind of did a schematic thing here, you can see there are very radically different styles. You don't have to be an art historian to see that. You know, the contrapposto, the shift of weight that happens in these classical figures, the incredible idealization of Pluto, who is a statue. It's not really Pluto, it's really a statue. They're offering incense to it or something there. But these others are schematic, and there was a lot of use of the drill as well as the tinsel. And so this was the idea. They just lost it. And they lost it for a long time. It wasn't until the Renaissance that it was revived. It was around 1900 that Elias Riegel from Vienna, from Austria, really changed the paradigm. And it's a sea change. It's a paradigm switch on the magnitude, I guess, of, in a way, physics goes from Newtonian physics to, you know, relativity theory, which I don't understand, but that's the same kind of thing. And Riegel said that, well, he pointed out a couple things. And just to use this one example, okay, if these people lost their technique and they didn't know how to do it, how do they make such a convincing head? Why isn't this head they added on archaic and crude, made with a drill, and would really stand out? But no, it's perfect. The style is perfectly matched. So that shows you right there that people at that time could do that, right? And so Riegel said that what we have to do is we have to see this not as a degeneration of something else, but of a thing in itself. And he felt that these enlarged eyes, this abstraction of form, reflected a new spirituality, a new depth, a new sense of the spiritual, of the soul, not moving away from that crude realism of a few centuries earlier and becoming kind of more transcendent. So we have to realize that where a statue like this would have been shown is in, for example, a court of law or any place where there would be legal proceedings. This is almost like we would have the flag, right? And the way we would swear on the Bible at a court, you would swear in front of the image of the emperor. So this is one of these imperial images. You sprinkle a little incense in front of him, say a prayer. And so what is being conveyed? Why isn't this shown brutally realistically? Well, if you, well, here's, I forgot almost. He brought this in. This ivory, and it's just absolutely exquisite, was done nearly 100 years after Galerius, right? So obviously, and look at the technique. This is not crude. This is not, there's this perfect idealization, a very low relief, which is very difficult to do in a difficult medium ivory. It's a very small little thing, and it's a pagan priestess making a little offering of incense for one of the old religion, one of the hangers-on in the maybe 380s, 390s. And so obviously there must be some other reason for this abstraction of form. And I have to say that if I were in a court of law, I would feel that this conveys to me that law will be observed. This is not a court where you can cheat or anything like that. You're very sober, law will be observed, but at the same time, there's a sense, I think, of mercy in with that sense of justice, that here with these eyes, he's sympathetic, he listens to you, and so these sorts of things took precedence over making it look idealized or making it look realistic, that it's not fair to just see these as degenerations of classical form, but rather as a whole new beginning of a more transcendent art. Here is another one, just a little earlier, of the Tetrarchs from Milan, these rulers. And their noses have been broken off and they're damaged in some ways. You know, they used to break the nose off because then the statue can't breathe anymore and the god would leave the statue. But these guys huddled together look almost more like medieval knights than like, you know, Roman. And you can see the transition from here to this early Egyptian icon, for example. Okay, so that abstraction of form does not represent a lack of skill, but a change of orientation. away from a materialistic world, away from a pagan world of idealized fleshly forms, and toward a more interior sort of thing. And so it really does lay the grounds for the medieval period. I think one of the most impressive of these early icons is this one. There aren't many left in Greece because of the iconoclast controversy. They destroyed most of them. So some of the oldest icons that we still have are in Rome. And this one is in a little church just off the Roman Forum, not that far from the Arch of Constantine. And it's large. It's a painting that twice life size. The head is large. And so it has a really imposing power. We think it's 6th century, maybe even early 6th century, Hans Belting. Now, it is in rough shape, as you can see. It was painted in encaustic, which is a wax, heated wax, and it was used by the ancients. The painting has been very damaged. The face of Christ is almost unrecognizable, but the face of the Mother of God has remained. And the presence, what Belting's talking about, this presence is very much palpable, I think, in this highly abstract transitional piece from late Roman to early medieval art. If we get a close-up of the face, we can see that actually the cloth, I don't know if you can see this arrow here, but this has been cut out. The face of Christ and of Mary were from some earlier piece that later on had been salvaged, I guess, and glued to this. Well, then on top of that, the 19th century, right, restored it by putting all this tempera, fixing it, right, with egg tempera. And in the 1950s, they were able to take the egg tempera off because the wax underneath it didn't bond well with the wax. So they were able to remove all of the tempera, and this incredible painting emerged with great presence. And I was delighted when Father Beau asked me to participate in this, because actually I've been thinking about writing a piece. And I think maybe you've put it on the website. I sent it along. It's going to be published in Living Church on their Christmas issue, and it's about this very topic. And you can read that if you'd like to. I love how she defers to Christ, how she's an intermediary. It's really quite extraordinary. Now, the abstraction in these art, I guess we call that the expressive distortion of this art, was not incidental. It was actually key to the theology that eventually developed around the cult of images. The images started first, and it's only later that there was a theology. And much of the theology came in the sense of an apologetic, because there were those who felt that venerating images was too close to idolatry. And it does, of course, say that, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, says very explicitly that you don't make any images. And so how do Christians explain they're not adhering to this ancient prohibition on images? And what they came up with is that now that Christ is incarnate, at Moses' time, when the Torah was written, there was no longer, Christ had not become incarnate. And so God could not be represented because he did not have a face. But with the incarnation, now God had a face. And if he had a face, it could be then legitimately reproduced. But what we needed was the true image of Christ, like the true bones of the martyr, not a plastic version or something like that, but and there's that materiality of the visage of Christ that had that power, not the power of the artistic imagination, but the power of the incarnation. And so they said that anything that was too realistic in a depiction of Christ would only capture his human nature and not his divine nature. In Christianity, Christ is is both fully human and fully divine, not a demigod, not half and half, fully God, fully human at the same time. And so to represent him realistically would only show the human side and would not show that divine aspect or that divine nature. But it was felt that by distorting and abstracting the image, the true image, that it would better reflect the incarnation, the transformation, the transfiguration of humans in the future by imitation of that true image of Christ. And so abstraction was not just, it certainly wasn't a lack of skill, and it certainly wasn't the artist being fanciful or imaginative. Rather, it was a very mystical search for the true image, whatever that is, the Verus, the Imago Verus, right? And I wanted to point out, and this is my, specialty in the early 20th century, is that I can't help thinking that both that change in art historical discourse and the revival of the Byzantine style by Conteglo and others of his generation was made possible because of modernism. Because once you see a piece like Senecio by Paul Klee from 1922, a Swiss expressionist who taught at the Bauhaus and so forth, and this is a Commedia dell'arte figure, I brought it in only because I think there is kind of a striking parallel between the two. And I think once people were able to see that one could distort form and still it's art, that then they began to look at pieces like the image of Mary, and it didn't look weird or alien or primitive. It looked deeply expressionistic. And so I think the modernism sort of laid the foundations for that. And I think this is an incredible piece, one of my very favorites. And I want to get into a discussion of the theology, but I want to just present, because this is St. Luke's, I want to present a little bit about that portrait of Mary, because this was considered this idea of Luke painting a picture from life. This would give us this true image of Mary and the Imago Verus, so the true image, not an imagination of the artist, but discerning the true face of Mary. And because Mary is the mother of God, she too should be transfigured by the Holy Spirit. And as a mirror of Christ, all the saints are transfigured. So that's why that abstraction kind of flows through the whole tradition. Okay, so many, many paintings have been put forward over the centuries that claim to be that painting made from life by St. Luke. And one of the most popular of these is at Santa Maria Maggiore, a church in Rome. And in their collection is this beautiful icon, which they brought out to ward off barbarians, and it's worked all sorts of miracles and all that sort of stuff, according to tradition. However, Hans Belting, and even I can see this as a non-expert, it is not the work of a first century painter. This is a Byzantine artist. It couldn't possibly have been made before the 7th century, according to Belting. It's a beautiful icon, worthy of veneration, but it couldn't have been by the hand of Luke unless he lived 500 years. An older painting, and a very mysterious and very powerful painting with a lot of presence, is the image supposedly by Luke that's in the collection of the Pantheon. The Pantheon, as you're probably aware, was a pagan temple. It's a beautiful dome. It's one of the most beautiful structures of ancient Rome, built in Hadrian's time, but it had been transformed into a church. And in their collection is this very old icon that purports to be by Luke as well. If we get a close-up, I'm sorry I couldn't get a better image on the internet, but this will have to suffice. I wanted to point out that striking asymmetricality of the face Jesus's face kind of looks off, but Mary seems to want to interact and make eye contact with us. And then I think this is a painting that also has a great deal of that presence that Belting is talking about. You can kind of feel it. You can see it in the eyes. The interesting thing about those very skewed, almost like Picasso eyes, that's so asymmetrical on her face, is that she is not looking directly at us. One eye kind of looks to the right, the other eye kind of looks to the left in a fisheye kind of a thing. But what it comes down to when you actually look at it, it's as if she's trying to establish eye contact, going first from one eye to the other. Did you see that? It has this incredible presence, okay? This also is very old and it's in very rough shape. It was probably done not in tempera, but in caustic, that very old kind of thing. But again, couldn't have been earlier in the 6th century just based on style. It just isn't in the style of a 1st century painter. There's a website and there are 68 paintings that claim to be this painting. I'm only going to show you one more. This one's from Athens. It's a little painting, very modest, not very well known. We don't know who did it. And it's quite early. And I find it very moving. How did this thing survive the iconoclast controversy? I have no idea, but it did. And I think it's a very powerful, very abstract kind of an expressionistic sort of painting, if you can put those words to it. Christ makes eye contact with us here, and he's like a little philosopher, and he's even counting off his points of his rabbinic teaching with his fingers in that manner. But Mary is a very sad and melancholy face, and I think it has a great deal of empathy, that she really seems to understand what it is to feel pain, to feel loss, to feel the death of your child, to see your own child die before you. That must be just incredible. My cat dies and I almost feel like I can't go on. I can't imagine what it would be like. But this artist, whoever it is, captures this beautifully, the very strange melancholy eyes, and one can see how to pray and to use this image as an intermediary. One really feels that sense of empathy, that she really understands what it means to feel hurt, to feel sad, to feel betrayed, to feel all those things. And so she can empathize with you and act as a mediator with Christ. But again, Byzantine style, it really couldn't have been done before the 7th century. So unless Luke lived that long, it couldn't have been done. It's not to say that Luke didn't paint it, but we just don't have them. Well, you might ask, well, then what does 1st century portraiture look like in the Roman world, in the greater Roman world that Luke would be part of? It's like this, breathtakingly realistic. This is a portrait in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and this is a very good copy. I mean, a very good pixelated image. I mean, a very clear image. Let me show you the face. You can really see the encaustic, this wax being used in the highlights here. Look at how, it looks like he used a stylus to scrape some of the lines in the hair out of the wax. You're always working with hot wax. Here, look at this here. This is incredible detail. This reflected light on the boy's cheek, just a little reflected light beyond the shadow that gives it that wonderful roundness. The thing is, though, there is some distortion, but it's so convincing as a realistic piece that it's almost hard to see. But the eyes are enlarged. If you look at the size of the eyes and you look at the size of his mouth, you can see that the eyes are slightly enlarged, but the overall effect is one of realism. And doesn't he look, it looks like it was painted last week, you know. It's about 120, they think, maybe 150. So it's not really 1st century, it's early 2nd century. But this was at the very realistic. Now, I hate to tell you this, but this was done after the boy's death. He would never have been shown as a boy if he'd lived into adulthood, because this is actually a mummy portrait. This panel was probably, as soon as the boy died, from whatever causes, a painter came right in and painted a panel from the corpse. They would also do on older people death masks made of wax. And very many noble Roman families with a proud heritage would have all these wax death masks of their ancestors. Very few of them survive. None of them survive, but we know them from descriptions. Now, this would have been wrapped up in the mummy like this. This is a little later one, but you can see how it was. It was called a Ka image. Ka's kind of like a soul. So it was thought that if the boy's body, he's mummified, if the boy's body somehow decayed or got into trouble or broke or something, he would have that, that Imago Verus. He would recognize that face, and he would be able to incarnate, or whatever you call it. He would be able to enter in to this face, and it has incredible presence. When you're in the Egyptian section, it's right kind of near the front of where you enter the Egyptian thing, these Roman things, incredibly beautiful and fresh and lively and lifelike. And but again, this funerary tradition, like all of late Roman art, entered into kind of an abstract phase. This one, I think, is the 4th century. This is from the Smithsonian. It's in a little rougher shape, but the very large eyes, very small mouth. It's been, the level of abstraction is greater, and this is even later. This is a female, a woman. Now I can see why in the 19th century they might have thought, they lost their skill. And it kind of looks up, but that's really not what's going on. It's a slow transformation of form. And this is an early Christian painting from a Christian burial, from Kitzinger's book from the 70s. And what he thinks may be martyrs, or maybe what they call votive figures, that they will continue praying for the suppliant, I guess you call it, in their absence. It continues to pray. And it has that very, abstracted style. Just another quick comparison. This is another Egyptian, one of these, mummy paintings. It's called The Brothers. It's damaged. But here, this brother has his own god, and this one has a different god. I'm not sure, Mars and maybe Minerva, I'm not sure. But these were, pagans. 3rd century, 6th century, right? Cosmos and Damian, I guess. It's a Greek. It's now in Russia. It's in Kiev, but it has great presence, and everything is very abstracted. This face especially, I think, has incredible presence and incredible, you can look into those eyes and really feel a connection, a deep connection. And just so you don't mistake it, this emblem here of Christ, because they take their visage from the true visage of Christ. So it all comes out of incarnation. Once the incarnation starts, it sort of causes a chain reaction where everyone kind of becomes transformed by this incarnational thing. My students always want to know whether these are headsets that they're listening to, and no, they're collars. Okay, so that's Imago Verus, that true image, not just a nice image or a pretty image or an idealized image or an expressionistic image, but a true image. So there was that painting attributed to Luke, but we can't find it. Maybe it will turn up someday. Another source of authority for the icons rested in these images not made by human hands, called the Achiropita, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It means image not made with the arm. And this represents 2 side panels, the right and left panel from a triptych, of which the middle panel is lost. And this is a reconstruction of it that Belting makes here. And this is a saint, and this would have been this cloth in the center with his miraculous image. And here is the king of Edessa with the image. So let's take a look at that. Let's get zoom in a little closer. The story goes, the king of Edessa in north of Galilee, I guess in what would be Syria now, heard about Christ, and he sent a messenger to Christ to say, would you come to the court to preach to the court of the king of Edessa? And Jesus said, I'm too busy. But he did give him sort of a souvenir. He took a towel and pressed his face to it, and miraculously this image of Christ was taken back to Edessa. It was kept for a long time during the Crusades. It was stolen. part of the looting of Constantinople. It was in the collection of the King of France in Saint-Chapelle. And then during the revolution, they broke it and they smashed everything, and it's been lost. So all we have are the two side panels left. But to give you an idea of what it was. And so this is also a true image. It's not made by human hands. It's actually a direct, what do you call it? Indexical image, like smoke, like a shadow. It is a direct imprint. And so it's kind of proof. There's no artist's hand intervening. It's too bad it's been lost. But again, the search for the Imago Verus. Of course, in the West, we have the story of Veronica wiping the face of Jesus, which is not, I don't believe in the Gospels. It's a tradition. And in the Vatican, they have this. Supposedly, it's the sacred veil of Veronica. However, I mean, look at it. It's a painting. It's very clearly a painting. Now, they say there were these smudges, and then an artist went in there to accentuate it or something like that. And who would dare do that? But even so, the proportions are off. Look at how long that nose is. And I can see the expressive purpose of large eyes or of a small mouth, right? The soul, the modesty of the mouth, but a long nose doesn't really represent anything except bad drawing. So I think here again, this it's very revered and it's all right, but to me, it's not at all convincing. The most convincing of these images to me that I've seen is the Shroud of Turin. And there's recently been some sort of scientific investigation. I think they did find there was some pigment on it, but this at least looks like it could have been the impression of a face. And so I think this is the closest we're liable to get to that kind of a thing. So it brings us back again to the abstraction of these early forms for expressive purposes, to reveal the true image that lies beneath the superficial reality, what the Orvot called the outer head and the inner head. And so we see a figure of the Mother of God transfigured and transformed by her relationship with her incarnational Son into a transcendent and very sympathetic and very empathetic being who really listens. Well, that's about all I really have for you. I do have one other thing, and then we'll talk about, because I think that this theology is very interesting, but I'm not sure if I'm completely convinced of it. Is this a good time to open it up to questioning, do you think, Father?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally game. Do you still need to share the screen?
No, I guess not,
okay.
Unless someone wants to go back to see a picture. But I can share it again if we need to. There we go.
Wonderful.
Okay, now
Thank
we can
you.
see everybody. Okay. It's a little, I'm not quite used to doing this where you can't talk to the people, so I'm glad we're having a chance.
It is always a learning curve. Let's see. I see Ralph's hand, and then I see Bruce. Ralph, kick us off.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, I like the idea that these departures from reality are a depiction of a deeper reality, not just an incapability of doing naturalistic painting. Now, of course, this raises the idea if that the big eye, the distortedly large eyes, are a higher reality. I wonder if you could, you mentioned briefly I wonder if you could elaborate on this. Why was the enlarged eyes a more powerful reality? I mean, it's more expression, but was there some religious factor in this in the small mouth? Thanks.
Well, Plato says that the eyes are the window to the soul. And I think that's really the basis of the thing. You know, the Greeks had the idea that there was a soul in a body, that the soul kind of inhabited the body and peeked out through the eyes. And so when you look at the eyes, you look at the soul. But at the death, the soul leaves and the body is there. The Jews didn't believe that. And I'm following up on some of the earlier talks here. They saw a oneness between the body and the soul, an inseparability. And this is why the idea of resurrection, rather than ghosts, right, a physical resurrection, has to do with this kind of palpability. But reverence for that. So that's where I think that comes from, is the eyes of the winter to soul. And it's not only in the Christian icons, but also in the mummy portraits, the same sort of thing.
Thanks, Ralph, and thank you, Doctor. Bruce, I think I saw your hand next.
Oh, yes. Could you spell for me the name of this early 20th century art history person that you spoke about several times? What's again, please?
I'm just trying to write it out. Contoglo. K-O-N-T-O-G-L-O-U. Contoglo. Photius. P-H-O-T-I-S. Photius Contoglo. You won't find too much on him, but there is. I wrote an article on him a couple of years ago.
Photius Contoglo. Contoglu.
Contoglo.
It's K-O-N-T-O-G-O-L-U.
No, G-L-O-U. Contoglo. Contoglo. Photius Contoglo.
K-O-N-T-O-G-O-L-U.
No, G-L-O-U. Glo.
G-O-L-U.
Photius Contoglo.
And when did he live and where did he live?
He was from Greece. He lived, as a young man, he came to Paris to be part of the scene that was there during the First World War. He wasn't deported. He was there during the First World War, as Picasso was, because Picasso, was Spanish and Spain was neutral.
Yes.
So he was there. And then later on, he went to Greece. And this is actually very typical of his generation. They were looking for roots. So Picasso looked at prehistoric Spanish sculpture. The artists of the Harlem Renaissance looked back to West Africa for inspiration. Modigliani looked to the Italian primitives of the 1300s for his inspiration and so forth. So it's this real feeling of this ethnic kind of connection going back. How real it was, I don't know, but Contoglo goes back to Greece. But he doesn't go back to the Greece of classicism, not the classical Greece that has come down to us in the West through the Renaissance, but rather the Byzantine style, that abstracted, semi-abstract, expressive style. And Contoglo, when he went to Mount Athos, which is this monastic mountain in Greece, he restored, and he got to see these beautiful, very, very old paintings. And he thought, why are we messing around with this oil paint and this realistic style with these corny icons when we could be doing these tremendous things? So he really instigated a renaissance, I guess you'd say, in it, so that the icon painters have been very busy for the last 50 or 60 years, because you find very few of those old oil painting icons. Someone gave me one and I didn't want it. It was kitsch, but then I didn't want to throw it away either because it is an icon. So I asked the Orthodox monks, they said, bury it. So I buried it. I mean, that's what you do with it. I didn't want to hang it up. I didn't want to be disrespectful. So I guess it goes back to the earth, I guess, or something like that. I don't know. But Contoglo, he's an incredible artist, incredible.
Thanks, Bruce. Ken, you have your hand up.
I'm sorry,
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. In regards to Roman iconography, at the time that the Romans adopted Christianity, I have read many accounts that he was basically replacing the sun god, the Roman sun god, who was Mithras at the time, and Sol Invictus. and that there are, and I've seen the icons of Jesus in a chariot.
Oh, yes, as Helios. Yeah, I've seen that too. You see, the Jews didn't have any, I'm sorry, finish your question.
No, I was just going to ask you to comment on it, or, that if you had seen it, which I was.
Yeah, I've seen things like that. And what happened was that, Christianity started off as a Jewish sect, and Judaism forbids images. So when they wanted to find images, they had to look outside of the Jewish ambit to the outside world and what was happening there. And so they did. For example, Helios or Apollo would be the prototype. Serapis, you saw with his beard, the god of death and resurrection, Osiris. I mean, it's a natural thing that they would say, okay, this is a similar kind of an image. So they reached out into the world to see what was around, to develop their own kind of tradition. But it mostly comes out of that late Roman abstracted style, which was already fully formed by the time the Christians got. So they adopted it.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's.
But there's a lot. There's also, for example, in the catacombs of Priscilla outside of Rome, there's a wonderful, I wish I would have brought it in, but a wonderful kind of cubicle that has these, but it has, for example, it looks like it could be Orpheus or it could be Christ. There's animals and he's playing the thing, but it could also be the Good Shepherd, you see? And a lot of times they would take and adapt things, like they take, a shepherd and make him into Christ, or take Helios and make him into Christ, or take Serapis and make it into Christ, or take, later on, Michelangelo takes like river gods and stuff like that as the basis for his depictions of God the Father. So,
But
did that answer it? I don't know. There's
yes. Is Helios is the same as Mithras?
no, Mithra was a Persian cult. You see, there were these cults.
Yeah,
there was
he
the
was a-
traditional religion with Jupiter and Venus and all those guys. But then there were these cults like Christianity, or like, it was considered one of the mystery cults, or like Dionysos. There was a mystery cult where they drink. And Christianity was at first one of these mystery cults. And so people were very suspicious. There's a lot of prejudice. They said, what do these Christians do at these cult meetings?
Right.
Drink blood. They say eat flesh, drink blood. So it's kind of Tacitus, in his biography of Nero, explains that the Christians are people who don't know where they are. And he gets it wrong, but I did remember it. And it's something like followers of Christus, a Jewish sorcerer, who was crucified under Pontius Pilate. But despite this temporary setback, the deadly superstition has broken out everywhere, and especially in Rome, where all decadent things flourish. So he makes it sound like a really kind of crazy cult, but he goes on to say they didn't burn down Rome, and they don't really do anything that's dangerous or anything. They're just kind of a superstitious thing, and he kind of has to explain it that way. That's probably kind of how people thought of the Christians, especially after it become illegal. Why was it illegal? Why were they meeting secretly?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I when he just said it, it was illegal, but
Oh no, I'm sorry. Mithras was from Persia. It was the sun god of the Persians. And so in the catacombs, you find not only Christians, but also Jews who also buried, also, disciples of Serapis and of Mithra. And some of these Orons figures, it's hard to tell if it's Mithra or Christian. It's kind of, a lot of the iconography is similar. It's not just Christians in the catacombs.
Yeah, I read that originally Mithras was from Persia and went back, I don't know, a couple of thousand years or a couple of hundred or 1,000, whatever it was. But the Romans adopted him as their sun god.
Especially especially the military.
The military, I was just going to say
Military,
that.
only men could belong to Mithra.
Right,
And the
yes,
initiation, listen to this,
yes.
talk about a macho religion. They'd put the man naked in a pit, and they had a grate over, they slaughtered a bull, and he was bathed in the bull's blood. And that
In the
was
blood, yes,
to
yes.
Mithra. And so Mithra, there were some soldiers also that were Christians. So there was a rivalry between the followers of Mithra and the followers of Christian
Yes.
among the military. They were both popular.
Well, actually, I read that they tried to, that the early Christians tried to cast Jesus in the mold of Mithras as a way of sort of getting the Romans to accept him, and sort of kind of, maybe fending off some of the persecution, because they could say, hey,
this isn't so odd. This is kind of, we recognize this. This is not dangerous. Yeah.
right.
See, Mithraism was never illegal. And Christianity was actually illegal until 313.
I missed that. Say that again.
Well, I was saying that, these cults, Mithra, Osiris, various things, they were all legal.
They were all
You
legal.
could do it.
Yes.
They might think you're screwy, but you could do
Right.
it. But Christianity was actually illegal and was punishable by death. And they didn't enforce it so much, but it was technically, it was illegal, and people were martyred
Yeah.
for being Christians.
Well, that's why, I've read that they tried to make Jesus into, like a Roman god, or Roman, or a pagan god, in order to sort of make him like, acceptable, like, one of the bunch kind of thing,
Yeah.
and
I think
so,
also they wanted to distance themselves from the Jews. I think that was another one, especially after 70 AD, after the destruction of Jerusalem. They thought we
Right.
don't have anything to do with Jews. But the bad thing is, there was a tax, a kind of a Jewish tax that the Romans extracted from Jews. And if you paid this Jew tax, you didn't have to offer a pinch of incense and a prayer to the emperor, which was like saluting the flag. Even atheists offered the little pinch of incense, but Christians couldn't do it, and Jews couldn't either, because you couldn't pray to the emperor as a god. If you paid the Jew tax,
yes,
you were exempt. You could say a prayer for the emperor. You say, may God bless the emperor and make him just, or whatever, like that. And if you paid that Jewish tax, but the Christians weren't covered by that unless they were Jewish Christians. And after 70 AD, they started, so there was that struggle to emerge from Judaism, from the mother religion, distance themselves politically from the Jewish people.
right, yes.
Whereas Jesus, of course, was a Jew. And I can't help thinking that if you show Jesus an icon, he would have, what is this? Why are you, I really think as a fully human, first century itinerant Jewish preacher,
Yes.
that he would not have recognized this tradition, which is not to say it's a bad tradition. A lot of traditions that we've picked up, for example, rosaries, right? People, rosaries came from the Crusades. The Muslims had rosaries where they recite the 99 names of Allah. And that comes from Buddhists who had rosaries. So just because the early Christians didn't, or Jesus wouldn't have recognized rosary beads, doesn't necessarily mean they're not valid. But I can't help thinking that Jesus would have been very confused by this veneration of images.
Yes. Thank
Perhaps
you.
not. I don't know. I'd love to open it up for debate. Because, if I was giving this to a Greek Orthodox church, I couldn't open up for debate. I feel I'd have to do the party line. But here, we can kind of play around with this a little bit.
Yeah, Sean,
Thank you.
and then Bruce.
Sorry, Ken. Speaking of the Greek Orthodox, you didn't talk any about some of the Luke icons that exist today in Orthodox monasteries. I know there's one in Cyprus. I think there's one on Mount Athos. I think there's one at St.
There's
Catherine's.
68 of them. Belting finds 68 of them.
And
So there's lots of them.
is
But
there
he
any
dismisses
reason,
them all. He dismisses all of them on stylistic.
but I'm just wondering, was there a reason you stuck to the ones in the West and didn't talk about any in the East?
No, we did. I did bring the one from Athens. Remember the little one of Mary that I said that such empathetic eyes? That was great.
But I'm wondering,
But
the
during
ones
the
that have ended up in monasteries that have been there for centuries, might,
or buried in the backyard or whatever to keep it from being destroyed. So some of those did make it through, but for the very earliest icons, we find them more in the West or like on Mount Sinai and very, very isolated places. But as far as I know, and as far as Hans Belting says, he dismisses all of them as they couldn't possibly have been before the 6th century. He may be wrong. I'm not a connoisseur of the 1st century, but these paintings look Byzantine to me. They don't look like 1st century realism. Maybe we'll find one someday.
thank you.
Bruce, you had your hand up after Sean, and then, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to just comment that there's an annual lectureship every fall that's put on by the Orthodox Christian Studies Center at Fordham University. And about 2 or 3 years ago, the speaker was Helen Evans, the curator of the Byzantine department at the Met, who's put on several wonderful exhibitions over the years. And in this particular lecture, which you can see on YouTube, if you YouTubed Helen G. Evans, Orthodoxy in America lecture, you can see her talk, and it's a really fun, wonderful talk she gave at Fordham Lincoln Center on how the mentality of the West began to change from, say, the classic writing of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire and his very low opinion of Byzantium, and beginning with the Crystal Palace exhibition in the mid-19th century, she discusses all of the major art historical exhibitions of Byzantine art from the mid-1800s to the present. And she distinguishes between those that were national exhibitions and those that were international in scope. But it's a wonderful overview by Helen G. Evans, EVANS, Orthodoxy in America lecture. And it's a YouTube talk that it begins and ends with Orthodox prayers. And they're also an honor to the people that endowed her position at the Met Museum. Why can't I remember that name right now? I even met them because the widow was there. I actually enjoyed speaking with her, but that's a wonderful overview of all the major art exhibits about Byzantine art for the last 150 years.
I had never known that the Crystal Palace, I'm surprised there was Byzantine art there because it wasn't an art exhibit at all. It was an exhibit of modern technology from 1850.
I think there was some art. Listen to it. Maybe I'm lying to you about that one, but there was something from the beginning of the middle of the 19th century in England. I thought it was in connection with the Crystal Palace, but I may be lying to you about that. But
well, it's easy to get a lot of these international expositions that they did in the 19th century. There were a lot of huge ones. 1889 in Paris, the Eiffel Tower, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. So there are a lot of these huge expositions.
My grandfather attended the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. Wow. But anyway, I just thought I would mention her YouTube lecture.
Yes,
I'll the annual Orthodoxy in America lecture of the Orthodox Christian Studies Center at Fordham. Yeah.
Fordham.
Thanks, folks. Any other questions before we wrap up?
I really think this is wonderful that you did this. And I just have one other reflection or comment in that, because I also think it's wonderful now that we're more aware of not only Eastern Orthodox iconography, but also the iconography of the Oriental Orthodox churches, the Armenians, some of the Persian, and certainly the Coptic and the Ethiopian art.
Yeah, wonderful
And
stuff.
those large eyes,
Oh, yeah,
those large
very,
eyes remind me a fair amount of the
yeah.
wonderful richness of the iconography of the Coptic and Ethiopian churches.
Yeah, they're considered Oriental Orthodox, as you say. The Greeks
Yes,
don't.
yeah.
They're monophysites. How do you say that? Monophysites?
Yeah, nowadays they sometimes say Miaphysite instead of Monophysite, but yes, happily, these groups, they're not in full communion yet, and who knows
Yeah.
if they ever will be, but they are in much closer respect to each other than would have been true 40 or 50 years ago or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
For example, here in Yonkers at St. Vladimir's Orthodox Theological Seminary that
Mhm.
has Russian Orthodox founder roots, today about 35% of the students there are Oriental Orthodox students.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's a certain respect there now. Yeah. And another example with the Orthodox Christian Studies Center at Fordham, they fund some young emerging PhD type of scholars to study particular things. And they've made a special effort to have more than one over the last several years that were either Coptic or Armenian. So this is exciting.
Yeah, there's a real ecumenical bug has even caught the Orthodox in some ways. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for having me. It was Bo, you're going to put that article on the website, I guess, and it's going to be coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah, I'll send it out to the adult ed mailing list
Cool.
that I have. This presentation will also be recorded and put on the church YouTube. So I'll make sure that you have that link, Dennis. So if you want to use it for any other
I
purposes.
put it on my website. Yeah.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
website, by the way, is dennisraverty.com. So easy to remember.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so thank you for having me, and maybe we'll hook up again.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you all and have a great night. Thanks for joining Adult Ed at St. Luke's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,